right, thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. We have an update with Glenn Mullins, CEO of Val-d'Or Mining Corp. Val-d'Or trades on the TSXV under the ticker VZZ. Glenn also runs another two companies in the ZZ group, as he calls it. But today we're going to be talking about Val-d'Or. The format of the presentation will be an update by Glenn, and then we'll jump into Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to input them in the Q&A box, and we'll get to those. And as many of you may know, I am a director of the company, and just for clarity's sake, I'm doing this webinar in the capacity of a director, just so there's no misunderstanding on that. Glenn, thanks for joining us today. How are you?
Really good. Nice to see you always. And thanks very much also for your contributions as a director.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's been 4.5 years now, quite a while.
Hard to believe how time passes like that. I remember first reaching out to you.
Yeah, it was deep COVID then. Anyway, Glenn, I mean, the company's been through a little bit of a stagnant phase, but you put out some fantastic results recently. Maybe you can update us on kind of what's going on with the company and what you're planning over the coming months.
Yeah, well, our main program is a joint venture with Eldorado Gold, and it started small and stayed small for the beginning, which translates into low news flow. And that's what characterized really the last 3 years. So now we have 5 agreements with Eldorado Gold, and the total earn-in commitments are $36.5 million that they must spend on our properties amongst the 5 agreements. The first 3 years, they were really focused on building a database in areas using their own methodology from other projects elsewhere in the world. And so they focused more on soil sampling than we normally would. And that was an interesting learning phase, but it doesn't translate into the types of news releases that really move the needle for shareholders. So we accumulated over 6,000 soil samples during that period of time, and then followed that up amongst the more anomalous and interesting areas with geophysical surveys, drone geophysics, ground geophysics, prospecting, sampling, geological mapping, and all of that leading towards drill programs. And so that's where we're at right now. We just released our drill results from the Perestroika prospect in Quebec last week, or September 26th. We had some spectacular results in that round, and that was a follow-up program. So that was gratifying to most of us that some of the ideas that came out of 2024 are now more crystallized and provide a platform for looking forward at the same time as we're about to embark on drill programs in Ontario. So all of that to say, Eldorado Gold has been a fantastic partner for us for going into the 5th year now.
Just on the recent results, so how far is Eldorado Gold along in the earn-in on Perestroika?
Perestroika is one of 4 projects in the original earn-in agreement. So they had to spend a total of $10.5 million amongst the 4 properties. And it's at their election how they want to distribute or allocate that. It could be all on one or equal amongst the 4. To date, with 2 drill programs done at Perestroika, that one has been eating up most of the capital with the original agreement. But there are 3 other properties, and they're in the Kirkland Lake area of Ontario. And so the way the agreements are structured is Eldorado Gold are the operator for the Quebec projects, which makes sense given that they have a mine in Val-d'Or, and the Perestroika property is about 40 minutes driving north of the town along highways. The other properties are all in Ontario, and Val-d'Or Mining Corp is the operator on all those programs. And if shareholders were to look at all of the agreements, there are 12 properties. 10 of them are in Ontario. Val-d'Or Mining Corp is the operator on those 10, and Eldorado Gold are the operator on the 2 in Quebec.
And what's the strike length and average width of mineralization delineated at Perestroika to date? And how many gold-bearing zones have been identified?
Been thinking about that quite a bit since results were received a couple of weeks ago, and since we've had some technical committee meetings and back and forth with them. It's a bit early for us to put a general width and strike on, but I can talk about the mineralized footprint. All of the drill holes are within 1.5 kilometer strike length, and the total widths of that corridor being tested range around 300 meters. The average width of the intersections themselves which are looking quite interesting, are in the range of 7 to 10 meter widths. And the grades have been quite interesting, especially compared to the historical work in that area. We've been getting grades between 3 and 15 grams per ton over broad widths. So that's important, but it also ignores the fact that there's some terrific high grade intercepts that are narrow. And that's what was always characterized by this perestroika property. The original work in the 1930s was a bunch of quartz veins that were blasted, sampled, lots of visible gold. And I guess the main complaint or impediment was that A, the price of gold wasn't high enough, and B, it was spotty. So there it was, then there it wasn't. They had a difficult time building tonnage, stepping out from the original discoveries. What we've done is establish a completely different model, which is testing this mineralized footprint or corridor along the Destor Porcupine Fault Zone, or a splay called the Uniacke Fault Zone. And within that, we've been able to vector in on singular areas of quartz veins, both flat-lying quartz veins and narrow wisps of quartz anchorite. And some of the best intersections are right near surface, over 100 grams per ton over very narrow widths. But that's important for geotechnical. And if you're thinking of an open pit starter, that would be perfect. And then these broad intercepts are at depth. And again, that becomes very interesting from a bulk tonnage point of view. And knowing that Val-d'Or is where Eldorado is based for their Canadian operations, the Lamaque Sigma complex, flat veins were historically by far the most important in those mines. And that's why I think there's some particular excitement about the perestroika results. And it's within trucking distance of their mill and along a highway and so on and so forth. So all in all, pretty promising to date.
I think you were referencing hole P 2519 when you talked about the shallow high-grade mineralization. It appears that this is a new mineralized zone. Do you expect this to be a continuation of the zone intersected in holes 2515 and 2516?
I think one of the most inspiring things to come out of this program is that we've actually expanded the historical area in 3 directions. So to the northwest, to the southeast, and to the north. And so it's really opened up the possibilities because we have broad, lower grade intersections throughout that span, which now trends over 1.5 kilometers. But we also have a consistency of high grade intercepts from flat-lying quartz veins as we interpret them to date. And hole 19 is more or less at the southeast end of this corridor. So it's new, it's not completely unknown, that area, but all of these veins have yet to be demonstrated as to whether they're part of a single system with multiple splays or bifurcations, whether there are intrusives that separate the zones, but they all line up rather well. The spacing is still too wide to be able to calculate a preliminary resource, but that's where we're heading. So 4,400 meters last year, 5,000 meters this year, and the technical committee is now doing its homework to look at what the next stage of a program could look like.
So in that 5,000 meter program, like what are they going to be targeting and when do you expect drilling to commence?
I think that if we look at all of these results in the context of the agreements themselves, then your prior question about where are we in the Eldorado programs becomes more material. They'll be in the 5th year of a 5-year earn-in by this time next year. And so there'll be a couple of decision points that are approaching. If they wish to vest, then they have a one-time opportunity to increase their 70% interest to an 80% by completing a preliminary economic assessment. And really the only way they could do that is to do an aggressive drill program through most of next year. So that's one thing that we're contemplating and looking forward to. And beyond that, there are the other 3 properties within the original agreement. So we're playing catch up with them in Ontario, completing soil sampling, geophysics, geology, prospecting, et cetera, and trying to establish drill programs on those 3 properties as well for the vesting to occur this time next year.
And going back to Perestroika, with work previously completed on the prospect in 2009, why was there a pause in exploration until now?
You're the first person to ever notice that, so kudos for catching that. It's an interesting answer.
We both know it was Magda that noticed that.
Well, it's a really good observation because this property was Golden Valley Mines property previously. And around that time, if shareholders look at stock charts and have good memories, they'll notice that there was a related company, namely related to Golden Valley Mines, called Abitibi Royalties, that had the good fortune to have a 3% NSR in what is now the Odyssey mine by Agnico Eagle. And so Abitibi share price was increasing on a really great trajectory, and it moved from 30 cents to over $25 within a short period of time, taking Golden Valley, the major shareholder, with it. So by the time both those companies were transacted, the last trade in Golden Valley was over $12.50 a share, Abitibi over $25. But what shareholders may have noticed is we actually stopped doing all exploration. The argument was, why keep diluting yourself when no matter what money you raise and invest in a grassroots project, it's unlikely you'll find something better than the Odyssey mine. So stop, freeze the capital structure, let all the properties lay fallow, and wait for a better opportunity for financing and exploration. So that opportunity came after the transactions with Gold Royalty Corp. And Val-d'Or Mining Corp ended up acquiring all of these properties, but therein is the hiatus where these properties had very little done other than maintenance to keep them in good standing and pay the taxes and so on. And Val-d'Or Mining Corp now benefits from renewed exploration and hopefully a better financing climate too.
Looking at the big picture for Perestroika, is there like an analog or an operating asset that's similar that you would compare it to?
I think if you look at all the mines along the larger Cadillac Fault near Val-d'Or, so think Goldex, Canadian Malartic, Odyssey, La Ronde, the Lapa mine before that, and a long legacy list of mines such as Westwood, IAMGOLD, and the former Doyo and Bousquet mines, Cambior. All of them are in very similar or analogous geological contexts, shear zones, significant specific types of alteration, and the Destor Porcupine is effectively a mirror to that. The Destor Porcupine is much better known in Ontario than in Quebec for the simple reason that on the Quebec side, it's almost all covered by a very thick swamp. There's nothing to see. It depends on geophysics and diamond drilling. Whereas in Ontario, it's hummocky ground. A lot of it actually sticks out, hills, small subcrops. And that's how the original discoveries were all made. Prospectors, boot and hammer around Timmins. And as they moved east from Timmins towards the Quebec border, the ground started dropping until there was nothing to see at all. And that's really why all the early discoveries were on the Ontario side, very few in Quebec. There's a couple of historical projects near us on both sides, west, east, that did not become mines, but that sank shafts, intersected good mineralization, etc. But I think where we're inspired is we're looking at what Eldorado Gold are doing at the Lamaque Sigma complex. They're the operator. They appear to be very motivated with the Perestroika property, making certain obvious comparisons to the Lamaque, etc., flat veins being high grade. And that's where we see a really good opportunity. So the comparison is really north to south, Destor Porcupine to the larger Cadillac. And that's where all of the economic models, including all of the contemporary operating assets in the Abitibi, that's where they're all located right now.
Infrastructure at site?
Highways, power, all of the above. Very few communities. The town of Senneterre would be on one side and Barrault on the other side. They're both small towns of around Senneterre, 2,000, Barrault about 1,000, 1,500 people. The Perestroika properties midway between the two, which about 20 kilometers from either one, along a highway, a good maintained provincial highway. We haven't had any difficulty establishing our drill access and so on in the past few seasons. Most of the work is done during freeze up It's easier to move around in these swampy areas when it's all frozen. And so that's the context up to now. There's no habitations, there's no homes or communities within the property limits, and no other obvious impediments.
Okay. And then moving on beyond Perestroika, what other projects besides those ones are expected to produce revenue in 2025 or 2026, or which ones are you excited about?
Well, there's two main revenue sources for a company like Val-d'Or Mining Corp. The first one is option payments. So when we sign an agreement with a larger company or even a junior, there are option payments. In juniors, it's typically shares, and majors, it tends to be cash. So I think our total revenue from the Eldorado Gold joint ventures is in the range of $300,000 a year. And from our junior partners would be about half that, measured in terms of stock, listed public stock. And also with our junior company partners like Kirkland Lake Discoveries, another property in the Kirkland Lake area of Ontario. They've had some really good results this year, and for them, that was an opportunity to do an oversubscribed financing. And for Val-d'Or Mining Corp, it wasn't a core property. We had already had our work programs done on it about a decade ago, came up with decent results, but not company maker type for us. And so Kirkland Lake Discoveries had a different model, different idea. They're more focused on critical and strategic minerals. And they had comparable results to what we generated some time ago. But for them, the timing is much better. Critical strategic mania, etc. They announced a $10 million financing. They oversubscribed. I think it was $14 million. They attracted some of the biggest names in the mining space on their strategics list for the financing. So we're pretty inspired about that one. It's exciting to look at a partner and see the success they've been able to reap from that property. And we have several other joint venture partners in the nickel space, in gold, and in base metals in both Quebec and Ontario. And that's a large part of our business, is trying to create new joint ventures from existing properties. We have about 50 in total, 50 properties in the portfolio, and about 15 of them are subject to joint venture agreements. So the other 35 occupy a lot of our time for trying to conceive transactions.
And then can you provide an update on Juno Corp or any other private company that Val-d'Or owns shares in, and are any expected to go public in the next 12 months?
Well, Juno's an interesting case because they've been around since before COVID. They have a long attachment to the Ring of Fire, McFolds Lake in Ontario. Mr. Robert Cudney and his entourage were associated with the original Noront resources. They actually made the original discoveries in the Ring of Fire. And so that's an area that he obviously holds near and dear to his heart. And Juno has been a private company for each of the past 3 years. I think I've read that they're going public imminently, and I hope they do. They use $2.50 as their valuation on the financial statements. And we have 1.5 million shares of Juno. We've optioned or sold a property to them as part of their package in the Ring of Fire, and we retain a 1.5% net smelter royalty in that one as well. So a good royalty and a good stock position in a company that has been doing fantastic work. They've done at least 3 drill programs on different parts of their Ring of Fire program. And they've been doing complete coverage of geophysics, geochemistry, geology on their package. They have a massive package of holdings in that area, the largest private claim holder in Ontario.
Do you own shares in any other companies through Val-d'Or?
Yeah, we own shares in most of the junior companies that we deal with for the simple reason that for juniors, cash is very dear, especially in difficult circumstances. Usually it's easier to get a stake in another public company. We've done the same in reverse. We've often been the seller of properties. When we purchase properties from prospectors, it's the conventional method of we issue shares, the prospector receives a royalty, perhaps modest cash. So we hold equity positions in at least 5 other junior companies, and they're available to anybody that's actually interested to look at through our MD&A and financial statements.
And what's the current cash position? And can you give us an idea of expected revenue in the next 12 months and also expected monthly cash burn?
So because we closed the financing about a month ago, our cash position is back around $1 million. And the monthly burn rate is in the range of $100,000, but we can offset that with revenue from the various projects. I forgot to mention that there were two revenue streams. One is option payments. The other revenue stream are operator fees that we collect by running the programs. On the programs in which we're the operator, typically a fee in the range of 10% of the expenditures is what we retain. And so that's an important source for us in many of the programs and discussions. Most junior companies don't have significant staff. So usually it's attractive to them that a company like Val-d'Or Mining Corp, with offices and a base in Val-d'Or and good network infrastructure through the north, Quebec and Ontario, we become an operator for many of those junior companies.
Makes sense. And then one last question from me. So there seems to be a new big shareholder this year, Jimmy Lee, who it was announced yesterday will be joining the board. Can you give us a little bit of information about him?
I was pretty grateful to have some discussions recently back around Christmas with Jimmy Lee. He was a very important part of our transactions with Golden Valley Mines and Abitibi Royalties. And through that period of time, he was the only shareholder that ended up with a bigger stake than myself in these companies. So Jimmy did very well out of the Golden Valley Abitibi transactions, and he's come back in and done the exact same thing with Val-d'Or Mining Corp. He bought 12 million shares about a month ago, and now has over 14 million shares in Val-d'Or Mining Corp, VZZ, and thereby eclipses me. So he would be approximately a 14% shareholder. I would be about 12. Sidex, the Quebec government financial institution, have about 9.9, and Gold Royalty Corp still have over 13%. So we have 4 10% plus shareholders. And that's a pretty good shareholder demographic for a company as small as us. But more important, Jimmy Lee has deep pockets. I was enthusiastic to see his interest in the business model. Typically, we try to prevent dilution, use arm's length third-party funding to take all the heavy lifting financing to pay for the expensive part of exploration, while we go and do what we're good at, which is project generation, finding more properties, creating more transactions, doing more deals, creating more NSRs, and running the programs. And so this was a really good opportunity for us to see Jimmy Lee come back in. And I'm looking forward to working closely with him again. The previous experience was a good one.
It seems like he's been a great shareholder for you for a number of companies, and lucky to be able to work alongside him on the board. I met him at the board meeting on Friday, so that was great. Seems like a wonderful guy.
I'm looking forward to a long arrangement, but not that long. We're hoping that we can cause a transaction that results in a similar exit strategy for Val-d'Or Mining Corp. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is acquire grassroots properties, turn them into royalties, and sell the company as a royalties holder. The difference is we can't compete with the Franco-Nevada, so we depend on self-generated discoveries to attach value to the royalties.
Well, it sounds like a business model that's worked for you in the past, Glenn. Sounds like exciting times too. You've been, like I said, you've been quiet for a while, but now you've got a lot of news flow and a lot of drilling and work that's being done on the property. So I think it's a really exciting time for people to be looking at Val-d'Or, and it hasn't really participated in the mining market yet.
Well, in terms of the communications, it was a very quiet period of time because the market wasn't receptive to early stage grassroots results. But we were working the entire way through and building that data set, doing the soil sampling for Eldorado Gold on 12 different projects. All of that was essential to get to the drill stage that we're at now. And in terms of communications, now in a more receptive market, it makes a lot more sense to be waving the flag, touting the results. And that's why we're interested in working more closely with yourself and Adelaide Capital.
Great. Well, Glenn, thanks for coming on and providing an update. Thanks everyone for your participation and your questions. If anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out, or if you'd like to book a one-on-one meeting with Glenn, just let me know. Appreciate everyone's time. Appreciate your time in the update, Glenn. Hope you have a nice afternoon.
Thanks a lot, Deborah. Talk to you soon. Over and out.